It feels like the rules of software engineering teams have really changed in the last kind of 12, 18 months. At least that's kind of what we're being told. That's what's in the air. Well, that's what's in the zeitgeist. But from where you are, what has actually changed? Has anything changed within the teams?
Yes and no. I guess there's a promise of change, but I guess it's how it's materializing. And I think we've got different people at different parts of that change. And as a whole function, it's hard to put your finger quite on what's going on. I don't think anybody will say they have like a massive productivity change with AI or the way they deliver code is drastically changed. But there are pockets where things have changed. I don't know. I don't like that question.
What's the issue with it? Where's the tension?
I feel this pressure to like deliver change, and there's two things. There's this really cool tech, and like if I'm hobby coding, I don't write code anymore. All right, I'm chatting with Claude or with one of the models, and that feels very different. It's kind of vibe coding, but it's like a vibe has such a dirty word, right? It's more like instead of writing code, I'm prompting the code and I'm doing cool stuff. But I'm still very intentional in how I approach that. But I guess in production, like at PureGym, where we're writing code that's running a business, there's this pressure to deliver these productivity changes that to dramatically change people's days, right? And go faster, but we still have people that are invested in the craft and invested in the ways of working, and we still have Scrum, and we still have backlogs, and we still have busy product people and testers that have a board full of tickets to get through. None of that has changed. I feel like we're really focused on like the developer experience and how we write code, but actually there's this end-to-end thing that has to come along with it. And there's this promise and there's this sort of ask, and I don't think anybody is quite sure how to get there yet. And it's got to be sort of a holistic transformation that covers the people and the tech and the processes, and that that that's bigger than one person, right?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned that there's a pressure from somewhere. There's something which is driving at a kind of a drive for increased efficiency or speed, or is it just change for change's sake? Or what is that pressure? Where is it coming from?
I guess I mean there's definitely pressure I put on myself, right? So if you're leading an engineering function, you always have this obligation to deliver for the business, um, but also to help your people, right? And when you think about taking people through such a tectonic change in the way they work, that is a sort of a personal obligation for your team or for your organization. Right? You don't want to be in charge of an engineering function in 2028 that's still sort of hand cranking code and nobody's really up to speed, right? So there's a little bit of how do we keep up. But working for PureGym, which is a high volume, low cost business, cost and speed and our website and our digital app are the primary ways we engage our members, right? So it's how we acquire members, it's how we keep members, it's how they get into the gym. We don't have front desk, we don't have tills, we don't have staff in many of our gyms. So we're kind of the front of the business from a commercial point of view, and what we do really matters. Well, there's always more to do, and there's always the opportunity to do it better. So I guess AI is part of that, right? Is how do we become even more high performing for PureGym, but also how do we make sure for ourselves we're the best we can be?
So I think what I'm hearing is that there's a compulsion from your point of view, from a leadership point of view, to enable your teams to be as good as they can be and make sure they're learning new things and they're on the journey that they need to be on for their own personal careers as much for anything else. But there's a commercial reality to that, in the sense that there's a transition that needs to be made. So it's not that the change shouldn't happen. It's just how do you do that in a way that's commercially makes sense? Is it with additional training or time or tooling or whatever it is? Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Yeah, I think so. And I think there's kind of a realization as well. I think after the pandemic, there was this sort of real investment in technology and digital and growing of teams. I think we're kind of getting back to more of a new normal, right? So there is this view on cost. People are looking at where they're spending money. Businesses are trying to grow. Inflation is kind of settled down, but things have got more expensive over the past few years, and that's hit our bottom lines, right? So we've got to kind of accommodate for that. So yeah, I mean, essentially, you want sort of the most out of everybody you can get, and you want everybody to be using the best tools and best processes they can.
You mentioned that. There's a difference between the hobby coder who can throw something together and perform magic quite quickly, and what's happening in a, you know, productionized engineering team that's delivering real software. Can you sort of articulate that a little bit more? Kind of what is the difference? Why can't your guys just throw some code together and make it work?
Yeah, exactly. And they are. And we've talked about this in our teams. People are on a different sort of part of the journey, right? So we've got a couple of people that are sort of agentic first. They're spending most of their time on the command line and they're happy with that and they're delivering great results. There's a lot of people that are using the command line and AI for sort of some of the little things like a bit of scaffolding or a bit of, what's going on here, interrogating it to help them figure stuff out. But I think what happens with some of our coders is they're really passionate about the quality of their work and the code is kind of the output of that, right? And it's that transition from the output of my work is business value, which sort of everybody has in their minds. But for a lot of coders, there's that step that's the code first. And so they'll sit down at the command line and they'll prompt it or they'll use spec flow or they'll use a process to generate an outcome. But if that outcome isn't exactly how they would write it, that can feel like something they don't want to necessarily submit. And I think there's a little bit of accepting that and getting to the point where if somebody else gave me this code as a pull request, what feedback would I give it? And then just doing that. But I think there's a lot of, well, that's not how I would do it. I want it to be perfect. So then there's a lot of sort of extra going back around. So I think there's sort of a good enough code and maybe the lens of, would you approve that if somebody else did it? Because you're not as picky with other people's code in terms of your own personal thing. Obviously, it has to be good, readable, scalable, on standard, but you're not necessarily going to tell somebody to redo something in a different way without evidence based on your own personal passion. But with AI, you can because AI doesn't have a strong opinion or an emotion there, right? So you can then go and crank it or recrank it or spend time rewriting it. So I think there's a little bit of kind of getting people to be orchestrating the code that delivers business value and being a little bit less passionate about that code being their own product, if that makes sense. Because the
Yeah.
product is the outcome, right? That feels difficult for many people.
And it sounds like you're suggesting that the day-to-day of a software engineer is fundamentally either has changed or is going to change or will change, is going to change. We're on that transition. Is that kind of what you're reaching for?
Yeah, and that totally matters, right? Because people are software engineers because they've fallen into the job or they're good at the job or they like the job. But when you change the nature of somebody's day, that is an emotional journey and a creative journey for people. And the challenge I think we have is for a lot of people, we're taking some of that creativity and moving it to somewhere else. So if you're somebody who's wired by geeking out on writing really good code and you're used to having, 4 or 5 hours of flow in a day where you're doing cool stuff at the keyboard and you're now doing that with an abstraction layer between you and you're orchestrating something at a higher level, that is going to hit your core differently. That's going to fill your day differently. And that's going to leave you feeling different at the end of the day. And that's not something that I think is easy to just tell somebody to do, coach them and engage them on that journey. And when you're doing that with a big team that has, embedded processes and relationships and stuff to deliver, it needs it needs a bit of time. It needs a lot of thought. And I think one of the things with AI is it's happening so fast and it's changing so fast. We're kind of trying to do this in real time. And every month it's something new.
Mm.
So even the
Yeah.
things that we're talking about now that we learned in December with you guys are now starting to feel like they're falling behind.
Does it feel like the skill set itself is changing? Or is it just a case of, well, it's new tools and there's a new pipeline, a new process? Or is it fundamentally what it means to be a software engineer? Is that shifting?
I think it's evolving. I think when I think about my sort of coding with AI, things that the skills that I have still matter, right? So if I'm prompting, those skills and that 20 years of experience feed into every prompt and every step I'm taking and how I react to the output. But the moment feels different. Like I'm now sitting there scrolling my phone for 7 minutes while Claude pontificates.
Yeah.
Whereas before I would be more engaged in typing, right? So I do find there are these moments of this disconnection, which I'm not quite sure what to do with.
You're supposed to be out playing tennis or something, or, doing some
Doing
great
squats
artwork.
or football, yeah, or like doing a 10 push-ups every time you submit or something. Um, so I think that's changing, but the skills still matter. I just think it depends on what what kind of motivates people or energizes them in their day. Like I think some people really are kind of mathematical about their code, and some people are more about getting the story of the line, getting the value launched, or thinking about the big picture or the architecture or the people. There's people that play different roles in software teams. So you'll have people cranking out code, you'll have people like refining work, and you'll have people doing glue work, like fixing the build or writing documentation or going over the full unit test. And obviously everybody's doing a bit of everything, but different people have different passions and skills. And I think for some people this journey is easier and it ticks their boxes because they're able to be hyper productive and kind of meet those needs. And I think for other people it's a little bit more impactful with how they sort of fill their cup every day. And those are the people that need a little extra time, love, and we've got to figure out how these tools can meet their needs or help them find fulfillment in the new ways.
I guess that's the role of leaders, I guess, to help guide and shape that. I mean, I would imagine you're already identifying people that not fit into those boxes, but are, have leanings into one. How do you take people on the journey when maybe they're not so willing to move? Or, I mean, for example, I guess we years ago it was about Codecraft. The Codecraft community was huge with Uncle Bob and all that kind of stuff. I'm sure you remember it all well. Meetups about how the best way to shape functions and all this kind of stuff. That and that really scratched a particular itch amongst what people imagine, I guess, a software engineer to be. And you imagine people, is there still a role for that kind of thing? And how do you coax them into this new way of being? And it feels really difficult to be a leader almost at this point.
Yeah, and I think that's where some of the pressure comes. I think back to like when I was working in Costa with mobile apps. I was there for 7 years, and we started the app, and it was an MVP written in Java. And then when I left, it was all sort of functional programming on Kotlin. But that was like a 6-year transformation, and sort of module by module, function by function, and the engineers would get into fights about this or that and this model, and somebody would leave, and somebody would come in with new ideas. But that felt much more organic and incremental, and a decision or kind of a debate might sort of not fester, but sort of just be under experimentation for months. This degree feels like a lot all at once. So I think there's the speed aspect too that's really hard. And it seems to be, it's the first time that the technology has sort of really, really impacted the transformation in our own way, right? Like normally we're delivering software that makes other people's jobs dramatically change. Now
Mm.
we're delivering software that's making our jobs dramatically change. It's really fast.
Yeah, I mean that's a fascinating point actually because this is something we've seen a lot is that the marketing teams and the buzz around this AI function this and agentic function that, and obviously most of it, 99% of it is utter nonsense, to be honest. It's just marketing putting AI at the end. But the real impact is what's happening with the teams building the software they've always built and how they go about that. That's really where the new tooling and new processes are really impacting stuff. So it's interesting you notice that too, because you talk to anyone out in the wild, we've already got AI fatigue. Everyone's like, it's no different. It's just an extra couple of quid on my license fee. but it's obviously it's really impacting what's going on with software teams every day, and it's happening fast.
One of the challenges I have, back to your previous questions, it's happening fast and it's like at all layers. So I have to embrace it and demonstrate it and figure out, because I don't code every day, but how can I use these tools? My managers are making this journey at the same time their teams are making this journey. And so there is a little bit of top down and a little bit of bottom up. And when we talk about that emotional journey of people, it's all levels, right? And we're also trying to get people around us, our QA and our delivery team, to use these tools and figure out how to be more efficient. I introduced my head of delivery, our Sobono Agile people, into Claude Code and Obsidian Vault and Jira MCP, and he was sitting there all day yesterday, prompting and generating reports
Yeah.
and like interrogating backlogs and trying to get it to do Monte Carlos. And he was so productive and so excited. That was really cool. But his day is generating reports and looking at data and talking to people, so it didn't feel as transformative as I think because the product of his work is better outcomes and delivery plans and forecasts. So it was a more efficient way to get to the product of his work. Whereas I think for engineers, we're still in this: what's the product of your work, and how do you make that journey, and how do you do that at all levels?
While at the same time we're having this existential crisis about what's our value in the world, we're also being told that, well, this amazing new tooling is going to make us faster and better and lead us into a bright new future with rainbows and unicorns. And I wonder, does it almost get in the way of the experimentation required to kind of level you up? I mean, you mentioned that mobile project with Kotlin and how it took, 5, 6 years to kind of go on this journey. There was a lot of experimentation involved because the point of the process was to upgrade the language and modernize the platform. It's expected that a certain amount of experimentation and time would be required for that to coalesce and come together. But it's almost like with this AI piece, I think what I can see is that because we're told out of the bat, well, no, it's just going to make you better, quicker, faster. It's going to make you a superhuman. Well, you need to experiment to figure this stuff out and work out how it plays nicely with you. It's almost from the beginning, well, no, it needs to make me super quick. I can't waste time experimenting. So there's these two things being pulled at both ends.
Yeah.
So what do you do then as a leader to encourage people on this journey? We sort of touched on it earlier, but if you've got someone who's just like, no, I write code. That's what I do. I'm just going to be an iOS developer. I'm going to do this, or I'm a React developer, and I'm an expert in this. My code is beautiful. That's all I want to do. The rest of you do what you like, but I'm a code writer. What's the conversation with those guys?
Yeah, I think we're getting less of that now. We had that last year. I think people are sort of starting to get excited, which is good. I think what's left is making sure everybody's productive. But we started a couple years ago, like everybody. When I joined, we had a growth framework in place where there was sort of bands and competencies, and we were just looking at doing a trial with Copilot. So we added AI as a track on our competency framework. So essentially, at every band, you had to have a level of adoption with AI. And at that point, it was really about using Copilot in your IDE, and it's kind of that more fancy autocomplete. So we made it sort of an optional to start tracking people for that first year, and we just went ahead and got everybody Copilot licenses so they had what they needed to get started. Then last year, we refreshed that framework and made it mandatory. So to get promoted, you had to show that you were at your level with AI, and that meant a lot of people had to catch up. But that was still just sort of autocomplete and interrogating it and using it. And then this year, it's more of an imperative. We're resetting it. We've obviously done some work with you folks on embracing some command line and getting agentic stuff flowing. And my boss has given me an objective to show productivity improvements, which we're not quite sure how we're going to measure yet. So it's intentional. It's in our growth framework. If you want to be at a certain band or level, or get some more money, then you've got to show that you're adopting these tools. We've got a chapter, an AI adoption chapter across our team and our sort of data and analytics function, where we're sharing best practices. And we've invested a lot in sort of some of the knowledge that these agents need. So sort of our ND files and our spectral process, and making sure that all of our repositories are documented to be sort of AI understandable. So kind of part of what we expect, and we're spending a lot of time talking about it and creating space for people and making sure they have tools. We've also got a Cloud Code trial going on, which gives people some options on different ways to engage.
So it sounds like you started very much with the carrot and inspiration, but it's transitioning a bit more to sticks, and you have to do this.
You know what? It's a bit of a stick, but it's also just a bit of an imperative. Like, we've talked a lot with the team about what we think about AI and where we're at, and sort of making sure. One of our things is the people in our team are probably not going to retire still working for PureGym, right? Like, people have a job for 2, 3, 4 years, and we're pretty open about that. And we want to make sure that when you're ready to move on, you're more skilled and more fit for the job market than you are when you arrive. And part of that now is being able to use AI, right? There are places where you don't have access to the right tools, or you don't have permission to use them, or you're potentially being held back. So I think it's just really important to be on the forefront of the exploration and giving people the tools and making sure that it's part of their investment in themselves. But yeah, there's definitely a stick coming because we've got to get our move on.
Do you? I mean, this is the kind of the elephant in the room here in terms of teams and AI and jobs and roles and productivity and efficiency and all that bubble. Do you see a world where these teams are getting smaller? Or do you see a world where we're happy that they're going to produce an awful lot more and we'll get a lot more value? Kind of where are you on that scale?
Teams were kind of getting smaller anyway. I think that a lot of teams got really big after the pandemic, right? And I think I've seen that. So I think that there is sort of an organic right sizing and making sure you're careful about, when a lever leaves, if that will really right to replace. But that's just kind of a artifact of, the pandemic, digital panic, and then a bit of overhiring potential in 2021, 2022. I think there's a power of human creativity and ingenuity that we need and that companies need. And like AI plus a human is always going to be better than AI alone to solve problems. And in my experience for the last few years, businesses always have more ideas that we can implement, or that we have budget to implement, or that we have time to implement. So I think that we will get to a place where everybody's cup is full of work and things to deliver. AI will help us do that faster. But certainly, to our point earlier, the shape of the day and the skills we need and the kind of work people do is getting changed. And over time, that will lead to a shift in balance, right? So you might find that you have more engineers putting on their VA hats or their product hats, or you might actually have a different ratio of product to engineers to QA, and you might actually start to collapse some of those roles as things go faster and people are wearing more cross-functional hats. That's just changing kind of the way people work and deliver value. Will teams get smaller? Teams are always getting smaller and bigger, and companies are always offshoring and onshoring and
Yeah.
outsourcing and insourcing. But I think what's really important is for individuals to pick up these tools and become expert with them, because a human without AI is going to be inefficient. A human with AI is going to create a monster. And AI alone is kind of stupid right now. Like, it's really good at some things, but it's also really stupid at other things, and that's where we come in.
Yeah, okay. So the balance of the skills required is going to shift. We need less what we would traditionally call the software developer or software engineer, and more of the thinkers, the designers, the architects, the BAs, the business problem solvers, or at least the people need to have that skill set in their locker to enable them to do the work they're doing now.
Yeah, and it's not in when you talk to software engineers about their careers and their crafts, most people don't want to be sitting making CRUD forms their whole career, right? They want to move up to be a manager or an architect or a staff engineer. Like, people want to do higher level work, and this enables people to do that faster. So I think for software engineers, it's a great opportunity to accelerate your own progression as well, right? Because you can be so much more efficient, and you can also start to do that higher level thinking because you're not sweating it out on the sort of the might have been seen as junior or grunt work in the past.
And how on earth do we cope with juniors now? So I mean, from personal experience, we always used to run an apprenticeship scheme, bring in junior developers, we had a grad scheme, all that kind of stuff. And there's lots of good reasons for that. And there's a complicated mix as to why we do significantly less of that now, part of which is technology. But there's an obvious end game here where the AI is doing the junior role. Is that the obvious end game? And you don't need juniors anymore? I don't know. How are PureGym doing with that?
I mean, I don't think we've cracked that yet, and I don't think many people probably have. Young people and juniors bring a great energy, right? So we've got a couple of grads in our team right now, and universally, they are just respected as, really focused, really motivated, really hungry. And it's really important for mid-levels and seniors to have people to coach and bring along for their own development as well. But yeah, I don't expect that. I think that probably the shape of the team has changed, right? In the past, you might want to have like a group of seniors or leads, and then a large group of mid-levels, and then some young people coming up with juniors coming up. It's probably a bit more of an upside down triangle now, but I guess the hope is that we can get people through that funnel quicker, because more of the work is automated, so they're able to progress and learn and tackle the harder things quicker to get feedback on that.
It's tricky, isn't it? Because obviously the juniors need the early experience to be able to become the architects. You need to know what good looks like so that you can enable other people to do good. So it does create a bit of a pipeline problem.
And they're not going to experience some of the things that we experienced previous world with. That was a really dumb thing to do, or that optimization didn't work, or you just brought down production and your CEO is yelling at you, or whatever it is, right there. that journey is accelerated and compressed, and AI is doing some of the things that people need to go through, right? You think about learning to play the piano or the violin or paint a picture, like you have to go through very prescribed steps, and the craft of building and architecting and putting software together is similar, right? Um, it's it's I don't think that a lot of these sort of non-technical people that sit down and vibe code like a SaaS solution, it's not going to be very sustainable. And obviously there's security concerns and privacy concerns, but let alone just, building something that runs for a mass audience and works. That still needs a skill, but how do you get a junior there in 6 months instead of 5 years?
Yeah, you can't. I think, as you say, you need time to cook, don't you? That's it. If you just need time to cook, you need to be able to make the mistakes and learn the lesson.
Yeah.
It's a tricky one. Yeah, maybe who knows? I mean, I guess one option is the nice big organisations that are not capitalist in any way will just take the hit and bring juniors through and train them all for us. Or maybe there's a role for higher education. Who knows? But it's a real
And
problem.
AI and these models are getting better, right? So maybe this is a unique thing now, and they'll get good enough that um, juniors with some coaching will be able to accelerate quickly, and some of these kinds of mistakes and things that happened in the past won't be a problem anymore.
Let's just switch it up a little bit. So your background, you've been on consultancy side and client side, I suppose, as well. And you've run teams in both camps, and they have their unique perspectives and challenges. And you've been through technology transitions before. There are a number of them, large ones. How is it different? How is it different if you're trying to coach an internal product team, working for an organization like PureGym or some other, company with a product or a service that they do themselves. How does taking an internal team through this kind of transition differ from taking a client-facing consultancy team through this kind of transition? Is it any different?
Yeah, vibes are different, both sides. When you work for an agency, you're kind of a services technology company. So the quality of your engineers or the quality of your processes and the speed they can deliver at matter to your business. They matter to PureGym as well, but it's more about the product and the outcome. So like our website, how good it is at converting visitors to numbers. I think in an agency, there's a lot more breadth of experience across different verticals. You're jumping from client to client or responding to RFPs in different scenarios, and you're learning different regulations or different industries or different bits. And you probably work with several CMSs or several stacks, and you inherit legacy code that you have to sort out. So there's a lot more sort of responding and discovering and jumping in and urgency around things. When you work for a business like PureGym in a technology team or at Costa Coffee, you're kind of IT, so you're seen as a cost or a service to the business, and you have a specific role to play, which is to deliver something that people don't quite understand how it works or what it needs or how it goes. So I imagine at a place like Dutrix, you and your leadership team are making AI an imperative because that's critical for the business. At PureGym, it's sort of a curiosity and an opportunity, but for our team, it's sort of an imperative, and that has to come from me and my boss and my managers, right? So I think there's also the longevity, right? You work on one stack, one website, one product, one brand for a long time, and you invest in that code, and at a level that at an agency you might not get to if you're working on several clients or moving from team to team every 5 or 6 months.
Are you still seeing that drive for change coming from? Does it come from the top? Is it top down, or is it the teams themselves are looking to implement those changes? So an example I often talk about is when BYOD happened, when mobile happened, and everyone was taking their mobile phones into the workplace, and all of a sudden IT teams were freaking out, security risks and all this kind of stuff. But ultimately, they had to change because there was a bottom-up revolution that said, "I want to use this, and if I can't use this, it's going to be, it's going to be a nightmare for you." And so that transformed the way those teams operated. This often feels, and even with us, you can say, yeah, AI is an imperative. We grabbed on a bit early and tried to force it through and run with it. But we had a lot of the similar issues early on that you've described about kind of a resistance to that change. We had to drive it from a top down point of view, and I wonder, is that AI push coming from top down as well, because of maybe for different reasons, maybe for its efficiency, maybe it's we want to save headcount, maybe want to add a super cool new feature that everyone else is talking about, but it's coming from the top rather than from the bottom. Is that a fair characterization?
The AI initiative in engineering is coming from the top and the early adopters. So I think there's people in the team that are kind of all over it and excited by it and motivated by it. And they're blazing a trail, and other people are kind of seeing what they're doing, but not quite sure what it means for them yet. But for me and my management team and my boss, we're making it an imperative. But from outside IT, I think it's still a little bit of a curiosity.
Yeah. Is it impacting the way roadmaps come together? Like what your team will be working on? I guess it's always driven to a certain degree by what the business wants to achieve in the next quarter or the next year or the next quinquennial or whatever cycles your business happens to run on. And then obviously the implementation side of it, the IT side, technology side of it, has to then work to those goals. Is that dynamic changing? Are those loops getting shorter? We're really seeing that shift. Not in all of our clients, but some of our clients are really showing that the decision making friction is really shifting from what can we build to what do we need to build. That decision making process is becoming the bottleneck, and where organizations might have operated on annual cycles or 3-year transformations or whatever, they're now thinking, well, no, what can we do in the next 3 months? That's the only thing that matters. Everything's getting squeezed.
Yeah, I think we're lucky. We're already kind of on a quarterly cycle. There are teams that are hungry for backlog work. Like there's a start of a dynamic changing, but not. I wouldn't say at the strategic level. But there's always more to do. So maybe it's just that we've not sped up to create that sort of pull yet.
Yeah, so what's the priority then for where you guys are in your transition? What are you looking to nail next in terms of this tooling and processes and the ways of working?
I think we need to feel different, and right now we kind of feel like a software engineering team that sort of uses agile processes and cranks their work and delivers a good quality product that's kind of dabbling with AI. And I think what I want to see is more of that sort of backlog hungry starvation for refined work and things flowing across faster, because the command line and agents are the first protocol, right? So it's changing everybody's day so that their first thought is, how can I get an agent to do this? And there's a little bit of those people going through that journey, which potentially initially slows them down because it's a change in the way they work, but ultimately should make things faster for those people to get work across the board. But then I guess it's a revisiting of the whole process, right? So do those processes we have work anymore, and have we got the right balance of investment in where we spend our time, as we talked about before? I feel like there should be kind of a energy change or a vibe change in the team in terms of how we write code and what it means. I think a lot of our team are still on that journey, and it's kind of bottom up. It's kind of first adopter led, and it's kind of top down. And I think that's all good. We need to inject a little more urgency, which is probably where my head's at.
Yeah, pace feels really important. That's kind of what I'm getting from most of what you said today. That there is a sense of urgency around. If a team or an individual ignores this for the next 9, 12 months, what happens?
I mean, that would be unfortunate for them, wouldn't it? It would be like, a developer on punch cards not learning to type. It sort of feels like that would be head in the sand sort of behavior, wouldn't it? Or somebody not conforming to coding standards or formatting, or not, refusing to write unit tests. There's conversations you have when people aren't using the tools at their disposal. I think for the most part, everybody is on the journey.
So for the people listening that are running engineering teams and doing this in their own organization, thinking about they feel behind. Everyone feels behind. That's just where we're at, right?
Totally.
Everyone, doesn't matter where you are, everyone feels behind. But what should they be doing? What is the thing they're going to do next week to make them feel like they're moving forward?
I mean, stay off LinkedIn, because there's some crazy stuff out there that is influencers and people writing stuff that's just not real. I mean, it's like anything. Take the next step. Have the next conversation. Phone the developer up and see how they're feeling. What's your day like? When do you use AI? what you worried about. It's more about making sure your team is taking the next step, and that just requires conversations and empathy. Always about talking to people.
Just to kind of wrap this off then, what is the next thing that we should be talking about right now that we haven't mentioned today?
Like autonomous forms. Like how do we have these agents working overnight? So a batch of punch cards, right? And you would create a bunch of punch cards with code, and then they would be run through the machine overnight, and then you'd look at the output and test it, right? How do we get to that world where we go home, we have a lovely dinner, maybe we get to go home at 4 o'clock? How do we shorten our work days? And then how do we come back in the morning with some cool stuff built that we can review, validate, make sure it's secure, and get committed? I think it's probably trying to get this 24/7 operation up and running so that we can fill our days with smart work and yeah, maybe achieve that elusive 4-day work week. It does feel like whenever we change the way we work, we add more work, but maybe this time it'll be different.
Yeah, I guess as individuals, particularly those of us in leadership positions, we have a certain amount of influence over the way that goes. I mean, the cynic in me says capitalism will do its thing and we'll just ask people to do more work. But I hope you're right. I hope you're right.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know how we land that, but yeah, wouldn't it be nice?
Well, thank you, Gordon. Thank you so much for your time. It's been super interesting talking to you. And it's really great to hear what is going on inside a real organization. Because as you say, you go onto LinkedIn or, you listen to the media, whatever, and you get a very distorted picture of what's going on in the world. And you can feel like you're a long, long way behind with no way back. So hearing stories from the real world and the trenches is really, really powerful and really helpful. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.